Hello, it's Nikki, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but welcome to my 500th mini episode. I wanted to mark today and to give you a snappy 2-part series about this milestone for me. And I know we've just had the Platty Jubes here in the UK, so I'm definitely not competing with that. But 500 feels like a lot. So they are just the mini episodes. They're not the podcast interviews that I've done. This is just the mini episodes. And I want to take you a bit behind the scenes because I believe that this may make you think about your content. Well, that's the intention, certainly. To think about how you're marketing, how you're showing up, and what you're sharing and why. So I always knew when I started the podcast in January 2018, so 4.5 years ago I began. And I knew that I wanted to become online the person that I was in real life. And that sounds very self-indulgent, but here's what I mean. Back in those days, websites were very polished, very don't look behind the brand, don't look into the eyes. It was very formal almost. And lots of coaches and therapists, and obviously there have to be rules and terms and conditions and integrity and ethics and your ethos and all of that. It has to be professional. But I wanted to show how I could form a connection with somebody, because that for me is what my work is about. Building connections, joining things up, giving information so people can join the dots together to make that connection so they can actually do something with the information. So when I started with interviews, and it never ever occurred to me to consider doing mini episodes. And then I realized in August 2018 that I might have some things to say. I mean, who knew, hey? Who knew? And so I decided to try it, to consider what that might look and feel like. And yes, this is me admitting it fully. I scripted the first probably 4 or 5. And you can probably tell if you go back and listen. They're all on my website, nikkieraby.com/mini episodes. And I scripted it and I read them because I didn't trust my voice. I didn't trust that I would know what I would say, or I would fear that I would waffle on. And I probably do some of those things as well. But now I do feel like I've found a rhythm. I've found a way where I can speak to you and connect with you and share some information. So that's my first thought, I guess, is how can you find a way to speak in your voice that is not necessarily business jargon or saying things in a certain way, basically finding a way, or it may be, you may want to speak in a corporate business-like way. That might work for you. But what I'm saying is that moment when you read your website back and you're like, who is this person? Who is she? Who is she? But it doesn't feel quite like you. So look at ways that you can speak in your voice. And I really do feel like that I've got that now. I feel that I can say things in a way that feels really good. I can say things in a way that feels personal and feels like me. The second thing, little and often and accessible. One of the considerations I always had in the beginning was I found it really frustrating that I couldn't get the information that I needed in the way that I needed it. So when I was at college, or drama school rather, I remember going and buying the complete works of Shakespeare. And I think it was on the reading list or something like that. Like I had the massive book. I'm quite quite a small person. I don't necessarily have a lot of core strength. And I remember once we started to work with these texts, like, this is not going to work for me. I cannot lug this thing around. Also, the writing is too small on this. I need to be able to annotate it and to make it work for me. So I started, as we studied various plays, to go and buy the title, the small titles, the individual books, so I could use them and be able to access them. And definitely in 2008, and even before then, at that point, I had a 2.5-year-old, nearly 3-year-old, and I knew I wanted to have another baby as well. And I was really sort of finding my feet, and I knew what I was doing, and I had paying clients, and I had a successful business, whatever that looks like. And I felt really good about things. But there were a lot of things online that were being spoken about and acted upon that I wasn't doing. I wasn't going to abroad retreats where people were going to Costa Rica and having plant therapy or anything like that. I wasn't doing that. I was going to soft play with my 3-year-olds, and I was working when he was at nursery or he was asleep, or Matt had him, or his grandparents. Like, that's what I was doing. I was not finding myself in a jungle. I was finding myself in soft play and being at home. And yet I still wanted to make moves. I was ambitious. I wanted to grow my business. I was hungry for more. I wanted to do all of the things. And I just kept thinking, I know the internet is telling me that people are here, there, and everywhere on first class travel and on retreats and spending $100,000 on a life coach. And I just wasn't. Like, I was investing in my business and myself, but my overheads were not that at all. And so instead of being frustrated of thinking, well, I should do X, Y, and Z, or, oh gosh, why have I not got myself in a position where I can go and have plant medicine in a jungle and leave my child? I turned it on its head. And I asked myself, how could I share what I had to offer with people who were maybe in a similar situation to me? And that's not necessarily being in soft play and having a 3-year-old. That's people who didn't want to travel or didn't have that budget yet or needed the support in a different way. And I've really learned that through this mini podcast, is that I can give you, my lovely listener, little and often information. So I ask you, instead of building up to perhaps one monthly newsletter where you give everything, that's my bloody Google password asking me for more. Anyway, that's another story. How can you make it more accessible? I'm just laughing to myself that I'm sharing all of this. How can you make it more accessible so people can get what they need and when they need it? Number 3, I have been able to break down concepts and information. And that is really important to me. As with your industry, I know with mine, and in the acting world as well, in the speaking world, oh my God, there is a lot of jargon. There's a lot of fluffy, unnecessary chit-chat about nothing. And I always get to a point where I'm like, just give me the information that I need. Please, just give me what I need. And sometimes I don't have time to watch a webinar, which is 3 hours long with Q&A at midnight my time because it's in California. However, if somebody shares that on a podcast and it's 3 hours long and they do 30 minutes or even 15 minutes, I'm much more likely to actually listen and do the work and do the thing. And so I ask you the same. How can you make your information more accessible? How can you break down the concepts? And instead of sitting in that place of, I know all the things and you know nothing, how can you open up the conversation and strip back on the jargon or perhaps the presumption that people know what you're talking about? How can you come to the table and imagine that somebody is sitting on your sofa? Maybe you've poured them a glass of wine, a cup of tea, you've made them lunch, and now you're talking about the thing. How can you bring the concepts to a much more neutral ground? Number 4, I have found a constant when my life and my business has not been. Now, this for you might be your words, it might be videos, it might be your newsletter, it might be your funny posts, it might be a sketch, it might be a series of pictures, it could be all kinds of things. It could be a series on Instagram that you do. I was showing my mum, Jules Von Hepp, who I would definitely recommend following on Instagram. He really makes me laugh. And he put out a series the other day of things that annoy you. And it was just so funny what people were saying, because there was so much agreement, not only, but it's these really small things that maybe we all hold close to us, like, oh yeah, that really does annoy me. He also has another series called What Are You Having for Your Tea? And again, people share just what they're having for their tea, what they're having for their dinner. And it's really lovely. So whatever that is for you, what is your constant? How can you really optimize those? And since I began this mini series since August 2018, we've had a pandemic. I've made huge leaps and bounds in my business. I've had another baby. I've moved house. I've done lots of work on myself and healing, for sure. And I actually feel a very different person to who I was in August 2018. And I know that time, when I look back on it, was really pivotal for me. It really felt, as I reflect on it, to be a time of transition where I was opening myself up for the next chapter. And perhaps now I feel like that chapter is closed and something else is coming now. That was nearly 4 years ago. And I like to work like an athlete in Olympic years. No, I'm kidding. But having this podcast, being able to share information, how people can work with me, what I do, what I'm all about, has been my constant in terms of my marketing. So what is yours? And if you're not sure, and if you try lots of different things, have a consideration about what is the favorite? What's the thing that you always want to come back to? What feels easy? What feels accessible? What feels fun to you? Ask yourself those questions. Finally, before we move on to part 2 tomorrow, I want to share the easy wins. And this is constantly running in the back of my mind of, how can I make this easier? How can I make this easier? How can I make this smoother? How can I do this just once and let it fly and let it do its thing? And I've really looked at that over the last 5 years of becoming more efficient. Because as I explored and I did my inner work, I realized one of my patterns was overcomplicating things. And maybe that was to do with, and I know that it was, maybe it was, or definitely it was, to do with the belief that maybe I had, that I definitely had, about hard work. That I really had this sense that you had to keep showing up and not being able to just sit back and be in flow. I had to be there. And maybe that was the acting part of me. Like, you have to show that you're in the room, that you're focused, that you're ready, that you're good to go. And one of the things that happened a lot for me was I was so busy being on and focused and lit and ready that I didn't give myself that downtime to stop, to explore, to consider, to think about things. And so going for those easy wins has been a really lovely process to work through for me. And I have also noticed when I do the hard things, and the hard things don't always pay off. And I know so many people always want to say, like, you know, you'll really notice the hard work, keep going, and you'll find something at the end of it. Not always. And as soon as you start to feel that things are becoming hard and stretchy, that's when it's maybe time to consider what's next and bringing more ease and flow. I want to thank you so much for being with me. I know so many of you have been with me from the beginning. So thank you for listening, for sharing, for your good vibes, for being here, for allowing me to be here in your ears. I never ever take it for granted. It's such a pleasure. I love making this for you. I'll be back tomorrow with part 2. If you want to know how to build a podcast, by the way, and if you've got an idea for one, I would love to hear it. You can email me, hello@nikkiraby.com. If you want to talk to me about it and book in a free 15-minute session with me, do that also. And you can book a session with me, nikkiraby.com/sessions. Find out all the details. I am now doing things in person again, which fills me with a lot of joy. So I would love to see you and sit in front of you and watch things unfold and see what happens. All right. Sending much love, gratitude, thanks, love, light and strength. Oh my God. All of it. I love you.